Okay, so today is 10.2 and we're going to start factoring, which can be really easy as long as you follow the correct signs in terms of addition and subtraction. But before we do that, we're going to warm up by doing FOIL. So remember, FOIL is first, x squared, x times 5 is the outside, so plus 5x. 2 on the inside multiply to get 1x. And then 1 times 5 was 5. Then you combined our like terms in the middle. We had x squared plus 6x plus 5. Again, the same is true for the rest of these. The only difference is you have some subtraction signs. So we would still get m squared. M times positive 6 is a positive 6m. Negative 4 times m is negative 4m. And negative 4 times 6 was negative 24. And then we again combined our like terms. Last one was the same thing. FOIL it to get k squared minus 3k, subtract 7k plus 21. So in the middle we had k squared, subtract 10k plus 21. So the only difference is we have different signs that are in the middle. This is both addition, a plus and a minus and a plus. So it says here, trinomials like these can be factored back into a product of binomials. So remember, trinomial meant 3 terms, and we're going to bring them back into 2 binomials. So we're going to be undoing FOIL today. So to factor a trinomial in the form of x squared plus bx plus c, which is known as standard form, you must find 2 integers that add to b and multiply to c. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So for example, we have x squared plus 7x plus 12. You're trying to think of 2 integers that have a product of 12 and a sum of 7. So things that multiply to be 12 would be 1 and 12, 2 and 6, and 3 and 4. So out of all those factors, the one that would have the sum of 7 would be 3 and 4. So 2 binomials that would have this as factors. X squared breaks up into x and x, and it's a positive 3 and a positive 4. So that would be your answer. If I would be to FOIL this, I would get x squared plus 4x plus 3x plus 12. Combine my middle terms, and I would get x squared plus 7x plus 12, which is the exact same thing that I started with. So the factors are the binomials of the trinomial. So I'm going to show you guys how I do this, and then we'll go from there. So for number 1, I always make an x, and I always put the c value in the top. Oh, let me make a spot over here. I put whatever the c is there and the b in the bottom. So first I'm going to label this. N squared is my a, that's your b number, and that's your c. So I'm going to put 20 in the top and 9 in the bottom. And we're going to go through things that multiply to be 20. So multiply to be 20 would be 1 and 20, 2 and 10, and 4 and 5. Out of those factors, which ones are going to add to be 9? So you're thinking of things that multiply to be 20, but add to be 9. So that's 4 and 5. So my factor would be n plus 4 and n plus 5. So C is being multiplied, and B is what does it add or subtract to. So I'm going to skip down to 3 just because I'm hanging out over here. Okay, so this is my C. There's your B. I'm going to put 24 on top, 10 in the bottom. Things that multiply to be 24 would be 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 8 and 3, and 4 and 6. So out of these factors, which ones are going to add to be 10? And that's 4 and 6. So my factor would be a plus 4 and a plus 6. Let's do number 4. This is my B and my C, and that's my A. C is 1, B is 2. Things I multiply to be 1 are just 1 times 1. If I add those together, I definitely get 2. So my factor would be y plus 1 and y plus 1. The only difference in why it's labeled sets is now we're going to have potentially some negative numbers. So I'm going to still start out the same way and label it A, B, and C. I'm still going to make my x. I'm going to put now, that's a negative 18. And now I have a 3 in the bottom. I'm going to run through things and multiply to be 18. We have 1 times 18, 2 times 9, and 3 times 6. Now none of those added up together are going to give us 3. So then we need to think about what can be added or subtracted. So if I subtract 3 and 6, I would get 3. And one of those needs to be negative because I have a negative 18. So when I multiply them, I get a negative, and when I add them, I get a positive. So that would mean my 3 has to be negative. So I would have n plus 6, and now instead of all addition, I'll have n minus 3. So you need to be really good about your integer rules. Alright, 7, same thing. We have our A, our B, and our C. I have a negative 6 on top. And G, just G, so now we have a 1. Things that multiply to be 6 are 1 and 6, and 2 and 3. Out of these, nothing will add to give us 1, so we're going to have to subtract 2 and 3. And one of them needs to be negative. And if my answer is positive on the bottom, I need to have a negative 2. So I'd have G subtract 2 and G plus 3. Okay, one more. 45, it's negative. 4 goes in the bottom. Things that multiply to be 45 would be 1 and 45, 3 and 15, and, 5 and 9. 5 and 9 subtract to give you 4, and the 5 would be negative. So it would be C minus 5, C plus 9. On the back page, same kind of thing. Now we have double subtraction in our trinomials. So, I'm going to make my x. My C is negative 3 and my B is negative 2. Things that multiply to be 3 are 1 times 3. It's the only thing that's going to give us 2. And in this case, we need 1 negative, because when we multiply them, we get a negative. The 3 would be your negative, because when you subtract them, you get a negative. (11). We have our A, our B, and our C. Negative 63 goes on top. and -2 goes in the bottom. Things that multiply to be 63 is 1 and 63, 3 and 21, and 7 and 9. The only one that would give us 2 possibly would be 7 and 9, and the bigger number needs to be negative. One more. Make our X. Oops, that's not A, that's B. Put our C in the top, -7 in the bottom. Things that multiply to be -30 would be, and dry this one out, 1 and 30, 2 and 15, 3 and 10, and 5 and 6. Only one that's going to give us 7 are 3 and 10. And your 10 would need to be negative to give us a -7. So it's x plus 3, x minus 10. Next set, again, it's just different signs. Let's go A, B, C. Things that multiply to be 24, that add or subtract to give us -11. So multiples of 24 would be 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, and 4 and 6. The only one that would give us 11 possibly would be 3 and 8. And in this case, when we multiply, we have a positive, but when we add, we have a negative. So they both need to be negative. So they're both subtraction. For 72, run through factors, because that's your C, and that's your B, and that's your A. Things that multiply to be 72, let's see, 1 and 72, 2 and 36, 3 and 24, 4 and 18, 6 and 12, and 8 times 9. The only one that's going to add up to be 17 is the last one I wrote down, which is 8 and 9. And they both need to be negative, so they multiply to be a positive. So it's y minus 7. I'm sorry. Y minus 8 and y minus 9. What else did I do? 49? Sure. Things that multiply to 49, I only wrote down 1 and 49 and 7 and 7. There might be more. Hopefully not. That's your C and that's your B. So things that multiply to 49 that would add to be -14 is -7 and 7. So I'm going to have x minus 7 and x minus 7, which is the exact same. So another way to write that would be x minus 7 squared, because there's 2 of them. Mixed practice, so this is all the same thing again, but now they're just mixed around. So I'm going to pause here and stop the video and then make another short one, so you guys will have to watch the second one as well. So give me 1 second.